This recording is to help you with the first half of this lecture. Up to page 6 in the lecture notes and this PowerPoint. So that's going to be the focus. So basically, when we're talking about the extent of confusion, what we mean by that is three different theoretical positions when it comes to justice. So basically, in this lecture, we're going to be discussing utilitarianism, and then the views of John Rawls, and then Amartya Sen. So with the first two of them, with utilitarianism and John Rawls, you've got some awareness of, but Amartya Sen is a new one for this year. Now, before we get into the theoretical points, I want to spend a bit of time just going through this quote here. It's a very long quote from, as you'll see at the bottom, from Sanders et al. So basically, what they're talking about is the different values in criminal justice. So they select the 7 different interests, values, different purposes of the criminal justice system. So as they say, this list isn't controversial, because I want you to think: are any of these 7 undesirable in themselves? Could a rational person really disagree with any of these 7 different values? So where the criticism comes in is not because of these values; it's because of the different priorities that people attach to them. So. And they use the term there, as you can see it there. The fact that they call it dangerously misleading to pretend that all can be achieved, shows how critical that they are. So, thinking about this, and really want you to remember how difficult it is to run a justice system when you've got to do all of these 7 different things. It really is important that you remember this. It'll make you realistic about the justice system. Hopefully it'll also make you think, do other people realise that this is how difficult a justice system is? So, what I'd like you to do is look at the different values and rank them in order of priority. So whichever of these 7 you think is the most important, put 1 for the second, put 2 for the third, and so on until you get to number 7. So it's worth spending 10 minutes on this. I know it's going to be difficult, but it's worth doing because it'll make you think about these different things. Also, what you could also do is then think about whether your local MP would classify these values in the same order of importance. So then you've got kind of a politician's kind of view on the importance and your view of the importance. It's only hypothetical. It's not a test, but it's something that, as I say, that you could do. And you could also extend it to the point of view of a tabloid newspaper editor. How would they rank these different 7? So anyway, thinking about this, thinking of ranking things in order can be a useful form of research. If you have, say, a big enough sample of people, you could even see, is there a difference between genders in the way they rank these different priorities, or any priorities? It doesn't just have to be out this, obviously. But do different ethnicities rank these 7 things in different ages of people? There are lots of ways of how you can think about ranking these different things. Basically, what I want to do with this is just, I know you know this already, but it reminds you of all the different competing interests in justice. So thinking about that is just then sets the scene for justice. Then in terms of the theory that we're talking about, I said there's 3 theories that I want to talk about today in this session. So first of all, we only briefly mentioned utilitarianism, but hopefully you remember this from year 1. Hopefully you can remember that we should criticise it. It's very easy to criticise because utilitarianism has a view of morality by numbers. This idea that you can work out what's right or wrong just by counting things, surely it is problematic. There are many criticisms of utilitarianism. Who decides what counts? Does everything count the same? It's really difficult. So in today's modern world, utilitarianism is seen as an outdated thing. So I mean, just whilst we're mentioning fairness, I have mentioned Section 78 of PACE. Again, that's something that we've done briefly in the past. Those of you, well, if you remember your second assessment in modern criminal justice, there is Section 78 is what's known as the fairness of proceedings test. So a court can exclude evidence that would have an adverse effect on the fairness of the proceedings. So in other words, if it would be unfair to the proceedings. So it is relevant to the courts. They rarely explain what it means, but fairness is in our criminal justice system. Well, it's meant to be. So, in terms of moving on from utilitarianism and its cold-hearted, calculating approach, this is where John Rawls came in. So, hopefully, as you remember from last year, John Rawls had a very different view on what counts as justice. And he was an extremely influential scholar. So please have a look at your notes, from last year, and try and remember why it was such a potentially positive theory. Hopefully you can remember the veil of ignorance, and why that could be such an amazing thing. Now, I would argue that it is an amazing thing because it could make rational people make the right decision. It's people will want to share, people will want to, make the right decision in case they're a disadvantaged person themselves. So, so from a theoretical point of view, I think you've got a wonderful, humane, a theory to believe in, but, there are problems. So what we didn't do last year was mention the problems with John Rawls's approach. So on page 3, this is where we've got some of the criticisms. Now, obviously, at level 6, we need to be aware of these kinds of criticisms. So then the lecture then goes on to now Amartya Sen. Okay, so he's the new theorist for this year, and he's written many books, but that's probably his most important one for this module. You don't need to buy it, just you can find different parts of it. I'll put some of it on Moodle as well. So basically, it's similar to John Rawls in that he starts with talking about justice as fairness. However, disagrees with Rawls in the sense that institutions and procedures are the ones that are capable of delivering justice. He thinks more is needed, and I'll explain in a minute in terms of what he thinks is needed. What I do like about this theory is that it's really good, hence why I put it in bold. The idea that things are just or unjust, this binary idea, this true, false, yes, no, that's what a binary is. I might have said this before, like how computers work in terms of yes, no. So in other words, you can't just always say that certain things are always just or certain things are always unjust. It's more complicated than that. And that's where the who gets the flute conundrum kicks in. Now, to answer that question, you need to get the PowerPoint, the first PowerPoint for this lecture, and basically in slides 3 and 4, and please look at the others when you have a chance. Slides 3 and 4, you see that in this case you've got 3 children with very good reasons for getting the flute. So when you've got a situation like this, it's very difficult to say what justice is, but we need to be able to do it. We need to be able to answer these difficult decisions. So like I say, on slide 3, the problem is identified. On slide 4, which hopefully you'll see when you download it, on slide 4 you've got their different justifications. You can see how it's utilitarian and different kind of views. So hopefully what you'd see once you've read that PowerPoint is then that pluralism is an essential point in terms of in terms of Sen's theory. Okay, so pluralism, I think it's mentioned in the notes on the next page. So the next couple of paragraphs has got a bit more information about Sen's theory. Before we get to the bit on page 5, which I just want to emphasise these 2 parts of Sen's theory. So a little bit like Rawls in the first part, in that you've got these procedures and rules that can start you off with justice, but the point of view from an impartial spectator, and this what we call plurality of points of view. So in other words, different points of view. This is how Sen's theory differs. So in terms of in terms of Sen's view, impartial spectators can take what's called a social choice perspective. So in other words, these are people that aren't anything to do with the case. They've got no self-interest. They can be dispassionate about it. These are people that Sen believes can recognise and can see what injustice and justice is. So, in terms of then, if you then take it back to the who gets the flute answer, hopefully all I want you to do now is think about who might be an impartial spectator in resolving in that dispute on how you would solve that. So, like I say, if these three kids were, who in terms of getting the flute, they were your kids, who could be the impartial spectator in your case, and why? Then also, I suppose you could think, have you got any preferences yourself to who gets the flute? Is there anything that you would, prefer? And what about the view from an impartial spectator? So basically, the point that I want to kind of like finish on is this kind of point that there isn't a single answer. It's this plurality of justice. I was on to say that you've got different right answers, So this plurality, this kind of you can't define justice in one single easy soundbite sentence is arguably the main point about Sen. So we do then come to the paradox of voting, but I want to leave it there because the next recording we will start at this point. Okay, thank you.